Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be checking out a 12 volt 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery from Wattcycle, and it is a group 24 and it is geared towards trolling motors. So let's go and open it up and see what we have. Alright, when you first open it you get your Bluetooth app user's manual. Alright, the battery comes in this bag, and you also get a set of, two sets of terminal bolts and terminal bolt covers. Okay, now that I've unboxed this Wattcycle battery, I've noticed that the user's manual is not the trolling motor edition user's manual. It is the user's manual for the mini and the standard size batteries. The difference between the standard and the trolling motor edition is the BMS inside is actually stronger. It can handle up to 120 amps of continuous discharge, so that way it's better suited for use of trolling motors. Also, like I said before, this is a group 24 battery, so I'll go ahead and put the dimensions right down here. And this battery does weigh in at 23.15 pounds. This battery is also IP67 rated, so that means it is water resistant, dust resistant, and salt spray resistant. Of course, you don't want to dunk this thing in water, but it can definitely take a splash. A couple of other things about this battery is that it is a smart edition battery. So you will have the ability to download an app and be able to see a little bit more information about the battery. And also it has cold temperature charging protection, so we'll be checking that later as well. Just looking at the battery, you can see that it does say trolling motor, 12.8 volt, 100 amp hour, 1280 watt hour, and then it gives you the email, website. On the side here, it gives you a little bit more information about the battery, about the model number, the SKU, the nominal voltage, the capacity, the energy. And then right down here, it does give you the Bluetooth name of the battery. So if you buy multiples of these, you can differentiate the batteries by this name right here. When you receive your battery, it does come with these post covers right here, which is always good. And the posts are color coded, so positive is red and negative is black. That is always a nice feature. And it comes with this nylon strap that you can easily take off. All right, now that we've kind of looked at the battery, let's find out if the battery is actually working. What you want to do is when you first receive your battery, go and get a multimeter and check the voltage. The voltage should be right around 13.2 volts. So let's go ahead and do that now. And it is 13.22, which is perfect. That is roughly 50%. And what that tells you is that they are shipping it and storing it properly. The next thing you'd want to do is charge your battery all the way up to 100%. And if you have the ability, go ahead and do a capacity test to make sure that you're getting the 100 amp hours that you paid for. So I'm going to go ahead and charge this all the way up to 100% using a lithium iron phosphate charger that charges up to 14.6 volts. And then I will do a capacity test and I'll let you know what the results are when we get back. All right, well, the capacity test is done for this Wattcycle trolling motor edition battery. And you can see right down here that the capacity is actually 103.05 amp hours, which is 3% over the rated capacity of the battery. And this blue line up here is the voltage curve. And look how at the very beginning it drops down to like 12.865. And then it actually goes up for a little bit, all the way up to about 20%, which is right around here. And then it's back down to 12.865. So I thought that was odd that there was a little tiny bell curve right there. But you can see this battery stays at 12 all the way up to 95% of the capacity of the battery. And that's where it's at 12.1. And then the voltage just drops off in that last 5 to 8%. But this looks like a very, very nice curve. All right, now that the capacity test is done, let's get on to the high amperage testing. So let me show you what I got going on behind me. Okay, first we have the Wattcycle battery wired up to a 5,000 watt pure sine wave inverter. We do have an amp clamp right here to measure our amperage and another multimeter to watch the voltage. What this setup is going to power is a 1100 watt griddler. It's also going to power this New Wave induction cooktop and a hot plate, which is 1000 watts. And this little 200 watt heater for some precise measurements. This New Wave does measure in at 600 watts, 900 watts, and 1300 watts. And also on my phone right here, the app for the battery is actually displaying. So I'm going to go ahead and put it on the screen so you guys can follow along. All right, first let's put the app on the screen right over here. And then what we're going to do is we're going to turn the New Wave on to 1300 watts, and we'll turn on this 200 watt heater. So that'll give us 1500 watts, which should give us that maximum continuous discharge of 120 amps. So let's go ahead and start. All right, I see on the app that we're actually powering more than we wanted, but it is going down. So it looks like it's going to go down to about 132 amps. And our amp clamp is actually showing 135 amps. So I'm just going to go ahead and run this for 5 minutes just to make sure it can do it with no problems. All right, well, it's been 5 minutes, and you can see that this Wattcycle battery actually powered 130 amps without any issue whatsoever. The battery is still relatively cool. There's no hot spots. All the connections are nice and room temperature, so we have no issues. So let's go ahead and introduce another 1000 watts and see what happens when this thing goes over 200 amps. Here we go, starting now. And if you look at the app, it is 232 amps and the battery shut down. You can see on the app where it says Discharge MOSFET, that has turned from a green light to a grayish light, meaning that it's been turned off. And the discharge switch at the top right has also been turned off. So the battery performed very well with that small test right there. All right, the next thing I want to do is I want to see how much surge this Wattcycle battery trolling motor edition actually has. Now this is kind of an experimental test because I can't usually capture it because it's so high. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to power this Shopsmith by turning it on. And this thing can usually, it could spit out 400 amps on startup. So I'm going to try to capture it and we'll actually see if it'll actually start it. So let's go ahead and start. All right, I got my Shopsmith plugged in and I've got my amp clamp set to maximum amperage capture. So let's go ahead and start it up and see what happens. All right, started. All right, it started it up. And my amp clamp captured 379 amps. So that's why it's the trolling motor edition. All right, before I disconnect this battery, let me go ahead and show you the app that came with it. I'll go ahead and put it on the screen right here. And the nice thing about what Wattcycle did is they actually put together a dedicated manual for the app. So that makes it super easy to download on your iPhone or your Android phone and set up. There's no questions asked. Once you do get it set up, here's what you'll see. You'll see at the very top that it shows the battery's at 86%, and there's also a state of charge indicator. Below that, we have our charge and discharge switches, and then underneath that, you can see the current voltage, the power in wattage, and the number of cycles that the battery has been through. Below that, you can also see the temperature in Celsius of the cells, the environment, the MOSFETs. So you have a whole slew of temperature information. Underneath that, you can see the battery status. You can see the maximum voltage, the minimum voltage, the average voltage, and the difference in voltage between cells. And underneath that, you can actually see the voltage of each cell in the battery. If you click on warning messages at the bottom, that will just tell you what is going on with the battery currently. So if you had an over amperage or a high temperature event, it would show up here. In settings, there's not much you can really do here because if you click on all these, it asks for your password. So in this area, all you can really see is the software version and the product serial number. But all in all, some pretty good information you can see from the app that Wattcycle provided with this battery. All right, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put this in a freezer that is set for 30 degrees. and I'm going to leave it in there for 24 hours to test if this does have cold temperature charging protection right at that critical level. So I'll see you back in about 24 hours. All right, well, it's actually the next morning, and it's only been about 15 hours since this Wattcycle battery has been in this Set Power portable freezer. And I want to show you, let's go ahead and put the app on the screen, and you can see that in the temperature section, you can see that the temperature sensor number 1 is at -1 degree Celsius. Temperature cell sensor 2 is at -1.4 degrees Celsius. The MOSFETs are at -1 degree Celsius, but the environment is still +5. And you can see that the charge and discharge MOSFETs are still green. So this battery still will charge in this condition right here. So I'm gonna go ahead, I'm just gonna turn this down to like 25 to try to get that environment down to the negatives to see if that's where it will shut off. All right, well, I just pulled out this Wattcycle 12-volt battery from my freezer, which was set at, I think, 26 degrees, just to make sure it was right on the line of being frozen. And let's go ahead and pull up the app to see what the temperatures are. All right, currently you can see that the environment is -1 degree Celsius. The MOSFETs are -1.2 degrees Celsius, and the cells are 1.3 and 1.5 negative, respectively, degrees Celsius. So everything is below freezing, I guess is what I'm saying. And that's about as close as I could get, so this thing should shut off. Now, I do see that in the app, it does show that the charging MOSFETs and the discharging MOSFETs are still lit green. So hopefully that's just because the battery doesn't recognize any sort of charging. So once we start charging it, hopefully that light turns off and everything works as expected. So let's go ahead and try to charge it up. I'm going to be using this LiTime 20 amp lithium iron phosphate charger. And you'll see right now that it's flashing green. That means that it's on standby. So what's going to happen is I'm going to connect the battery to the charger, and then this is going to go to a solid red, but only for like 1 or 2 seconds. And then it should go from a solid red to a solid green. That is because the battery is telling it to shut itself down. So let's go ahead and do it. All right, make sure and watch the app too to see what happens there. Okay, here we go. All right, solid red. Oh, and it is not shutting down. And I see that the environment jumped up to 0.4 degrees Celsius. I mean, was that why it was on the verge of not stopping? But you can clearly see in the app that the cells are still below freezing. They're -1 degree Celsius, which is so close to the line. But it does kind of make you wonder, is the programming right at 0 degrees Celsius, or is it at like -10 degrees Celsius or something like that? But I'm going to call this a fail because I don't think with the app saying that the cells themselves are below freezing, that this should charge. All right, so what do I think of the Wattcycle 12-volt 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery that is intended for trolling motors? You know, I do like it. It gave us overcapacity when it came to the capacity test. It did great on the high amperage testing. I was able to do 130 amps continuous for 5 minutes with no problem. And then when I tried to push it past 200 amps, you know, I think it was like 200, 230, it shut off within 3 to 5 seconds. The cold temperature test, I don't really know what to think of this because I usually would throw this thing in my deep freezer and it gets down to 0 degrees Fahrenheit, which is, I don't know, -20 degrees Celsius. So it's way below what it should be intended to charge. But this is the first time I actually try to get it down to right at freezing, right at that 30 degrees, 0 to -1 degrees Celsius, you know, 30 degrees Fahrenheit kind of deal. And that's where, you know, stuff is starting to kind of happen. You know, so that's where your battery can be damaged, is in starting in that realm right there. And you want to make it so your battery won't charge if it sees that flip of 0 right there. So since the app did say that the temperature sensors on the cells were a -1 Celsius, I would have expected this BMS to shut off. You know, I understand that there's variance in temperature, you know, give or take 1 or 2 degrees, but if the app itself says -1, I expect it to not charge. So unfortunately, that's a fail in my book. All right, so thank you so much for watching this video. If you have any questions about the Wattcycle 12 volt 100 amp hour lithium iron phosphate battery that is intended for trolling motors, please leave it in the comments. I'll have a link to this item in my description just in case you want to look further into it. Thank you so much and have a great day. Bye-bye.